All right, so welcome to your first for real pharmacology lecture. To get started, I guess we should just say, what is pharmacology? So pharmacology is basically just the study of drugs and how their actions influence living organisms. So, why should you study pharmacology? Well, maybe you want to be a professional. Maybe you want to be a pharmacist. Maybe you want to be a doctor, and it's important to know how these drugs are going to influence your patients. Maybe you're just going to be alive, and your doctor is going to want to give you some drugs, and it's important to know how those drugs are going to influence you and your body. So what is a drug? A drug is going to be anything that changes the processes of the body. So anything that causes a change in function in your body is a drug. So technically, water is a drug. Oxygen is a drug. In this course, we're going to focus more on drugs that are produced by humans, that are consumed by humans to treat certain illnesses. So, where do drugs come from? The drugstore. Your dealer down the street. No. A lot of the drugs that we have, that we use to treat stuff, comes from plants. So morphine, codeine, heroin, all that comes from the same plant. This poppy plant, Papaver somniferum. But then digitalis comes from the purple foxglove. Quinine, what's used to treat malaria, or used to be used to treat malaria. Some have become resistant, which we'll talk about. Quinine comes from the bark of the cinchona tree. A lot of the drugs that we have that we use, we get from plants. We also get some from fungus, like penicillin, peyote, and from animals. A lot of animal hormones have been used in the past to treat stuff. So, we get drugs from nature. There are three phases of drug actions, or three types, three sections of getting drugs to your body. The first one we're going to talk about is pharmaceutics. So what is pharmaceutics? Pharmaceutics is the formulation of this medicine. So what all needs to go into this medicine or this drug to make it effective? Okay? And this comes along with the design and the form of it. So drugs can come in a bunch of different forms, from powdery substances to pills to liquids to shots, creams, ointments, a lot of different types of forms of pharmaceutics. Just kind of off the top of your head, think about what is the most common way that we get drugs into our body. Well, 80% of the drugs that you get from the pharmacy are going to be taken orally. They're going to be a pill that you need to swallow, or a tablet that goes under your tongue that dissolves. A lot of them are taken orally. For that, the drug has to go into the body, and then it has to get absorbed into the body. So you can put a pill in your mouth, and if the coating on it won't get digested, then that pill will just come out the other end, right? You put a tablet in your mouth that's supposed to dissolve, but if it doesn't dissolve, it's in there forever, and it doesn't get the medicine, right? And so you have to get these things dissolved, broken down, absorbed, but not so broken down that it stops working, right? And so that all goes into this pharmaceutic, this design of that medicine. The next group is pharmacokinetics. So the movement of this drug. How does it get processed through your body? There are 4 stages of pharmacokinetics. You have absorption, distribution, metabolism, and excretion. So when we talk about absorption, there are basically 3 ways to get drugs into your body. What do you think they are? Well, one is passing through your intestines, enteral. So this would be like taking a pill and swallowing it, getting it broke down and absorbed through your intestine. The other is not doing it that way. So a lot of the other types of absorption are para-enteral. So if you have to get an intramuscular shot or an IV or subcutaneous injection, these are all going to be para-enteral, okay? If you get a suppository, that's going to be enteral because it goes into the rectum, right? Percutaneous is going to be through the skin, so a lot of your ointments, you can get steroids this way, going through the skin. And I just gave you examples of all those. Which one do you think has the quickest rate? Which one do you think gets to work the fastest? Do you think it's something that you have to pop in your mouth and swallow, get digested, absorbed through the intestines? Do you think it is something that has to get rubbed on the skin and absorbed through the skin? Or do you think an injection right into your bloodstream is the quickest rate? If you said C, you're right. So, para-enteral tend to be quicker. That rate is based on route. So how fast it acts, how fast it gets into your systemic circulation, the faster it is absorbed, the faster it can go to work. This can be passive active or vesicular pinocytosis, which is kind of like a non-selective active, just kind of bringing in extracellular fluid into the cell. So this is really non-selective, where active is very selective and passive is, well, passive. How well a drug works or how much of a drug you have is based on its bioavailability. So this is the percentage of the dose that reaches your systemic circulation. So if you take a pill and it gets digested and absorbed through your intestine, odds are not all of that is going to get absorbed and some is going to come out as waste. If you get an IV of a drug, how much of that is going to reach your systemic circulation? All of it, right? Something else to think about with drug dose is if you take a pill, after it gets absorbed into the intestines, so it gets absorbed into the intestines, and then you have these veins that take it where? To the liver. And the liver is really good at breaking down drugs. There's a thing called first pass, where as your drug gets absorbed and goes through the liver, depending on the type of drug, the liver can wipe out a lot of that drug on its first pass through your circulatory system. So it hasn't even made a complete lap yet. It just went from intestines, liver, nulled, That's why a lot of the drugs that you get via shots, it's either because it would get broken down as a pill in the gastric digestion, or it won't get absorbed through the small intestine, or your liver wipes out a lot of it during first pass. So if you want high bioavailability, how are you going to do it? Boom, IV. So this is showing the bioavailability over time of a drug versus IV versus parenteral. Much quicker with IV, much higher bioavailability, then it gets broken down quicker. Okay, so still talking about pharmacokinetics. So we talked about absorption. Now we're talking about distribution. How does it get distributed through your body? Well, it's going to do it with your body fluids, mainly your circulatory system. So looking at how it travels through your circulatory, this is going to be influenced by blood flow. So if you have regions, especially like as we get older, blood flow to the extremities gets worse. So that means the drug reaching those extremities isn't going to be as available. It's not going to be as well distributed versus other places. You also have tissue affinity. So certain drugs will bind certain proteins or bind to certain tissues better than other tissues, and protein binding effect. So they are going to bind to certain proteins, blood proteins, plasma proteins, that help deliver it where it needs to go. And you're also going to have free amounts of drug floating around. So not all of them are going to be plasma bound. And there's a lot of cool information in this paper right here, the pharmacokinetic effects of altered plasma protein binding of drugs in renal disease. So if you want to read through that, it's pretty cool. It talks about like how trying to figure out which amount of drug is therapeutic, especially for people who have renal disease. It might not be best to look at plasma proteins because renal disease influences plasma proteins. And cool stuff. You also have to have free active sites for the pharmaceutical response. So it has to be able to bind its receptors, whatever that receptor is. Then we get to pharmacokinetic metabolism. So metabolism is the third thing of pharmacokinetics. The major mechanism for breaking down or stopping the action of drugs is due to metabolism. You gotta stop it from working. You do that with the inactivation by breaking it down by using metabolism. Primary site for drug metabolism, we've already said it. It's the liver. Liver enzymes break down a lot of these drugs into metabolites or water-soluble substances so they can then be excreted. There are certain drugs that don't become active until the liver activates them, which is also pretty cool to think about. So the liver is very important in drug metabolism. And then, of course, if it's not working properly, that's going to change the half-life of that drug. So, healthy liver, not healthy liver, has a lot of fibrous connective tissue, not a lot of healthy hepatocytes. That's going to influence how long the drug is around. Do you think it is going to increase or decrease the time that drug is around? It is going to increase it. So the drug half-life, this is how much time it takes for half of that concentration to become inactive. So if I give you 1 gram of whatever, how long does it take for that 1 gram to go to half a gram is its half-life. A healthy liver will metabolize and break that drug down a lot quicker than an unhealthy liver. And so people who have faltering livers or livers that are diseased will have drugs in their system a lot longer, and so it's easier to give them too much drug. Something to take into consideration. And then you get to excretion, getting rid of the drug, getting it out of the body, getting the metabolites out of the body. A lot of those metabolites can be harmful to the body, and we'll talk about this more when we get to certain drugs that like influence the CD40 family of liver enzymes. So, how do you get the drug out of your body? The main route is urine. Peeing it out. You make these metabolites into water-soluble metabolites, so then they can get pulled out through the kidneys into the urinary system, and you just pee it out. If you need to get drug tested for something, what do? They check your pee, because that's where they're going to find these metabolites. There are other routes, though. So you could also find metabolites in feces in the lungs, so just breathing it out, and then breast milk too. You can also sweat them out. Lots of different routes for these, but the main one is urination, peeing it out. And so, of course, if you have kidney disease, that's going to affect your excretion, right? So, healthy, happy kidney. You can see the glomerulus here, the capillaries, Bowman's capsule. These tubules are looking nice and clear versus this diseased kidney where you see all this scar tissue built up around the glomerulus and Bowman's capsule, and even scar tissue in here with these tubules. And so they're not able to work because they're clogged up with scar tissue, because stuff has broken through or been eaten away, and they had to replace it with collagen fibers, pretty much. All right, so 4 parts of the pharmacokinetics: absorption, distribution, metabolism, excretion. What does pharmaceutic pertain to? The design and combination of materials in a drug. So how to make a drug, pretty much. Bioavailability is how much of that drug is available in your systemic circulation. Half-life is how long does it take to get to half concentration of the original dose, or from any point on. So you can take the half-life from 0.5 grams. If you give 1 gram, you can take the half-life at 0.5, and it's going to be the same to get it from 0.5 to 0.25, and it goes down that line. What are some biological processes that can influence bioavailability and half-life? Look through those earlier sections and figure it out. We will be picking up with drug action, pharmacodynamics, in the next one.